Hello, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. Why don't you start out by telling everyone just a little bit about who you are?
Okay, my name is Anne. I live in northern New Jersey with my husband and two teenage daughters. And along with being a community volunteer, I teach part-time and dabble in writing, which are two things that I'd like to do more of in the future.
Nice, amazing. That's great. And why don't you tell everyone just a little bit about, what your relationship with your body was like before we started working together?
Oh gosh, what a question. So my relationship, I think it was more about my relationship with food, which has been a hot mess for 4 decades. I am a chronic dieter, who had a terrible relationship with food. And it makes me sad to say, but my body was a source of shame. And I never felt great about that because I didn't blame it, but I wasn't always at war with my body. I was more like at war with this one part of myself that never let me. I'd always, like I said, I've been chronically dieting for 4 decades. And there was one part of myself that just never let me stay on restrictive diet for long. And I just couldn't figure out why. And it was just this up and down. So before this started, I was just not at peace with any of it. There was just no peace. There was guilt and shame and just the opposite of peace, I would say.
hmm And like, how did that show up in your life? Like, did that prevent you from doing certain things or enjoying certain things? Like, what was kind of the impact of that on your
It
life?
really did. Unfortunately, it really did. This journey has made me look back on the past 4 decades. And it really has. Unfortunately, it's been a very big source of pain. It has absolutely made me self-conscious. It's stopped me from doing things. It's had me believe a certain things about myself. And now that I'm on the other side of this, and I just have felt compassion for myself, which is so lovely because there just wasn't any at all, really at all. So it was, yeah, no, it was, so I guess, so I was just always on a diet from the time I was 12. I grew up I was a very typical 70s kid. We played outside a lot. We walked to school. We rode our bicycles everywhere. So there was just a certain amount of activity built into all of our lives. And then one day I woke up, and my body was changing because that's what it does when you're 12 and going into puberty. But it kind of caused shockwaves through my family, especially with the female, my aunts and my mom. And it was like alarming, like, oh my gosh, look at her now. And I hadn't done anything different. So I was put on a diet, and it was a diet called the Scarsdale diet that they don't even have anymore. I think it was something like the Atkins diet, but it was very low carb. Um, and I and in that moment, everything in the way I looked at food completely changed. I realize now that after that moment, I never looked at spaghetti and meatballs the same, because spaghetti and meatballs was just something I had without thinking about it when I was younger. But that was never on any diet. I mean, you couldn't have spaghetti on, whether it was Weight Watchers, because it was like all of your, or so there was things like that really changed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was, yeah.
I think so many people will resonate with what you said because it's just, that time in your life where, yeah, your body changes. And if you start dieting that young, like it creates this huge ripple effect for the rest of your life.
It really does. And part of this journey, so I guess I can say where it started was, my father was really sick during COVID, and he was dying of brain cancer. And then we had the pressures of COVID, and my nervous system, it wreaked havoc on my nervous system. I mean, I was just always in this state, and eating calmed my nervous system. And then as I I got on the scale, and I was just like, oh my gosh. So part of me was shocked, but also for the first time in my life, part of me, I was able to make space for the shame of not liking what I saw, but also gratitude for food. I mean, it was the first time that I could actually say, thank heavens I had that food, because without it, and I'll never forget you saying on one of your podcasts, it's so innocent. I mean, I
hmm
ate too much ice cream. I didn't, I didn't yell at, like, I didn't, like, during a really hard time, I ate too much ice cream, big deal. But, and I was able to just, so this opened me up to realizing as how grateful I was for food and how it really was innocent. And then and then I think that's when I probably just started opening up to the fact that there could be another way of living in the world with food. And
Hmm.
I was listening to a podcast about the Enneagram, and I heard somebody talk about intuitive eating, and that led to another podcast. And I ended up buying the intuitive eating workbook. And the first thing they have you do is go over your diet history. And when I went back to that 12-year-old girl and I was writing about that diet and seeing like the impact that made on my life, it was such a moment because it was the first time that I think I ever realized in my life that it wasn't my fault that I gained weight back as soon as I went off that diet.
Hmm.
And then I was able to see that diets really don't work. They really don't work. And throughout this process, this intuitive eating journey, and then thankfully joining with you, um, I've been able to hold on to that truth. And that's one of the things I would tell people is find something, because going from diet culture to this, it's like, it is a radical shift.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and so holding on to something that you know is true, and diets don't work, and that has been able to settle me during the times of this of this new journey that I'm on.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And so was that kind of your you mentioned like there has to be another day. Was that another way? Is that sort of like the moment where you were like, okay, this is like I'm gonna really be on this other trajectory now. Like this is, there has to be this other way.
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
as soon as I discovered all of you beautiful, courageous women in this community, I'm like, oh my God, because it makes such sense.
Hmm.
It really, it just it makes sense. And it's so yes, it absolutely shifted me in a different direction, in a
Amazing.
completely different direction.
Amazing. Did you
Yes.
have any like fears or hesitations before
Oh,
you?
it's been terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly, I mean, I hate to sound dramatic because I tend to be dramatic, but no, it's been the most terrifying thing. But one of the activities I did with you with your core values
Yeah.
is, what I've learned about myself are my two core values are compassion and faith. And one of the reasons why I love being part of this anti-diet community is how compassionate it is. The way we are allowed to treat people, the way diet culture allows people to be treated is horrible. There's
Hmm.
nothing compassionate about diet culture. Diet culture is not compassionate. And everything about this way is everything, and including this self-compassion. And the other part was faith, and taking the leap of faith and trusting my body, trusting that I could eat everything it want. I mean, it was like, what? It was terrifying. It was terrifying because it felt really unbalanced. It like, oh my gosh, but it felt terrifying in a way. It was the reason I was terrified was because I was in a place I'd never been before. And I'm on a road I've never been before. And everything else, diet had been so. You also made me realize I was addicted to dieting.
Yeah.
Like that was my addiction. Like that
Hmm.
was such a radical, like, addicted to dieting. That made, like, every time things in my life would get like felt like too much, I'd be like, well, I'll just go on a diet tomorrow and then I'll lose weight and I'll never have to feel like this again. So when you took dieting away, it was like, now what do I do? And so this road is, and I'm still in the messy middle of a lot of it, but it's so and it's so, yes, for me it's been terrifying, but in a way that I know it's leading a place I've never been before. So it's exciting also.
Hmm. Yeah, that sums it up really well. That's the good kind of fear, not the fear
Yes,
that you want to run
exactly.
away
It was a
from,
good
right?
kind of fear.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly it.
You mentioned the values. Were there any other like key stepping stones or elements in the program that really helped you move forward?
There are just so many. There's just so many. I knew when I started, so I started the intuitive eating in like the end of February-ish, and I knew pretty quickly that I couldn't do this alone. That because the intuitive eating program is, I admire the women so tremendously who put it together. And that being said, it's also confusing.
Hmm.
And I felt like I was doing a lot of it wrong.
Hmm.
Because um, and so I knew I needed support. And then after going to your podcast, and listening to everything you said, and there were so many aha moments, I can't even, and then finding you and your group and finding a place, so many of our talks talk about holding two things at the same time and being, and understanding that this is a journey. And a lot of, just really, you showed me the ways of diet culture and the self-compassion and turning down the knob on the critic and making space for everything. So yeah, no, I could not have done all of the, I don't know if that's, if I were to recommend one thing to anyone on, it's find a community, because
Hmm.
diet culture is so rampant and so everywhere. I mean, there are women who I admire who do wonderful things in the world who are in diet culture
Hmm.
big time. Like, I went to see this one inspirational woman speak, and she had a CD on sale, like meditations on how to lose weight.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh
and that
yeah.
wasn't even her realm. I was like, really? So, and then at the time I didn't think anything of it, but looking at it now, so much about all of the modules and the groups and the Facebook page, and knowing what everybody else and having someone to share it with. It's all been, it's been a total game changer is all I could say.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So what's changed for you? Like, what are some specific things that you've noticed about how you feel in your body since doing the program together?
It's interesting. I realized that a lot of this journey is like the journey to acceptance. I realize there's a lot of grief, as you talk a lot. You talk about
Hmm.
grieving. One of those is grieving, and part of grief is all the other stages. And I think I was in denial for just the longest time, and so entering this, I actually entered my body. I'm living in it for the first time, and for the longest time, it just felt so uncomfortable. Like I almost felt like I just didn't belong in it. Like this isn't. Why is it like this? And for the first time ever, I'm comfortable in it. I'm just
Hmm.
comfortable. I feel like I belong in it.
Amazing.
And that hasn't that's taken like I said, it's all a process, but I really feel comfortable in it. I'm not at the mercy of food anymore. I'm not at the mercy of any sort of food. For 40 years, I was either eating food I didn't want because I was going to be going on a diet the next Monday and I better get all the M&Ms in, or restricting myself from food I did want. And one of the things you recommended was the Fuck It diet, and
Hmm.
I know I listened to your interview. That book came at a very good time. That book, I definitely love that book, and I followed, and that helped, and just really realizing that no restrictions at all, and
Hmm.
so, and I did that. And like I said, there was times it was terrifying, but I'm not at the mercy of a cookie anymore. If I want it, I eat it. If I don't, I don't. I'm not completely at peace. I still find myself judging myself like, oh, I wish, but then I offer self-compassion and I give myself grace and move on.
What's so amazing about that too is though, is that it hasn't even been a year because you were talking about
Yeah.
how this kind of like you really sort of started, like you ordered the workbook in
Yeah.
February and we're chatting now, it's December. So it hasn't been a
Yeah.
year. And so it's like, where how far you come in that time is actually pretty incredible.
And
To,
it's not linear, because about a month ago I
yeah.
was like, I've come nowhere, like this is awful, like like I can't, like it just, like I really thought I haven't
Yeah.
and then but now I really do, I feel comfortable, in my body for the first time since before I was 12 and had any issues with it at all.
Amazing. Yeah, I know one of the things you mentioned last time we talked was it happening like kind of like subtly. I can't quite
Yes.
remember the exact word you
Yes.
used, but
Yeah.
it didn't
It
come
is
on
it,
like.
it
really suddenly.
no, it didn't. It was very subtle, and but I just remember you talking about body neutrality, and when you talked about that, I just kept thinking, well, that might be good for some people, but I'm never going to be able to do that because I was, like I'm like one of these dramatic people who wants to like love my body, so I'm either going to love it or not love, like, and I just did never think but it's true. It's just, it's not, and it's nice. Like it didn't sound, I don't know. I guess, like I said, I could be all sorts of dramatic. So I'm like, oh no, but it exists, and these little things you can be beautifully neutral with something, and
Amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Were there any like highlight moments for you that you haven't mentioned at all, just out of curiosity?
Um, there were a lot when there was times when I fell apart on one of the phone calls. I didn't even know I was going to fall apart on one of the coaching calls, and I just fell apart, and I knew there was no place else I could have done it. No one else. No, there was no other place that would have gotten it and offered the compassion that you all had and the understanding. And that, I think, shifted it because there was so much grief. I remember the crying was coming from, and I didn't even think that was going to happen. I wasn't even sure if I was going to talk that call, but it all built up. So that was, and getting support around that. So almost every phone call there's something, but that was it. And like I said, learning that I was addicted to dieting, learning that my core values has just been, I mean, everything about is different. Everything I do now, I base on those values. And
Mhm.
I never even realized that before. And that, like I said, I think I was in denial for so long. And that one phone call that we had where I just let myself, I just didn't even let myself, I surrendered.
Mhm.
And it's hard to find, it's hard to find, maybe it's not hard for other people, but this community is so important to me because, like, I even found a therapist because with my dad passing away and everything, I tried to find it, and the therapist was terrible. There's therapists that can make this diet culture stuff worse if
Yeah.
they just don't get it. And
Mhm.
she just didn't get it, and it didn't work. And if that had only been my source of support, I don't know where that I would have probably not, it wasn't a good match. But yeah, no. So there's that's there's definitely was that one moment of surrender. And yeah.
And I remember that, and I think it takes a lot of bravery and vulnerability to do that, and so I
Oh,
admire you trusting me and the other individuals in our container on that process and in that process, and opening up yourself to it, because yeah, you have to go through it in order to get
yeah.
past it. And I think that it's actually kind of funny to me because I'm asking you about a highlight moment and you're talking about kind of like when you like really sort of like peeled off a lot of layers of the
Yeah,
onion.
exactly. When I
Whereas like a
finally
lot of
let
people would be
myself
like, that
go
doesn't
there.
sound like a highlight,
Yeah.
but it's the
I
way
think
that
it's because I
you
unloaded something that I've been carrying a lot.
yeah,
I unloaded
yeah.
something that I've been carrying, and there's little shifts that have happened. And
Mhm.
there's been, so that was, and just discovering this community was just a huge highlight. And
Mhm.
yeah, no, I know it is. It sounds more of like, yeah, it sounds kind of, but yeah, it does sound kind of like, once again, dramatic, but it was, and I don't think I even knew in the moment it was happening. But that really
Mhm.
is a credit to you and the space that's created on those phone calls and in the community that you have. And just to, you know, so yeah, so I'm just eternally grateful.
Amazing, amazing. So how does it all feel now? How does it feel to be in the place that you're in now?
Oh, wow. It feels so good. It feels, it almost feels like, it feels so good. It feels so different. It feels so good because I didn't think that, like I said, I didn't think this was possible in the beginning of this. There were so many things that I didn't think I could get, I didn't think I could get through. Um, I didn't think my perspective could ever be changed even if I wanted it to. And I have a different perspective. I get to see the world through compassion. I'm a nicer person because of it, because of this whole journey. I'm not only just nicer to myself, but I'm nicer to everyone. And I understand all of it. It feels, yeah, I wish I had a word other than, it feels like peace like peace is coming in, peace is
Hmm.
showing up. Yeah. And that's really what I've always wanted. And peace is showing up.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. Someone I know in my life who's very wise once said to me, I don't think we want happiness. I think we just want peace. And I was like, yeah. So you just kind of reaffirm that.
Yeah,
Um,
I definitely, that sounds great to me.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So what's one piece of advice you have for people listening who may be in a similar spot to where you were?
The one thing, I mean, I do have three pieces just because I thought about it. One is,
That's okay.
above all else, more than anything, is to join the community. Um, Join a community. Like that you just, it's not something that you want to do alone, even if you could do it alone. So I would say join a community. One thing that I also wanted to add that's just so great about the intuitive eating part of this is that what I love about it is that no one can tell me what's right for me. I only know that. And that is so liberating. And I don't know what's right for anybody else because I would get so preachy with my diet stuff. I don't get involved with anybody. I don't know what's right for anyone else. So that's like a twofold. So I would definitely, my one be all would be to join a community because it makes all the difference. The other thing I mentioned before was just to find you're going to feel so lost in between, like as you leave diet culture and go into this new world. So I would say find something that sounds true to you. And like for me to say diets don't work, I was able to hold on to that in the moments when I'm like, I just have to go back on a diet. I have to, like, I just would able to say diets don't work. Um, and the other thing is open up, like try to allow more feelings, more than like to try to create a space, which is what the community does. And you talk about this a lot in your modules, is create a space for self-compassion so that you can allow these feelings to be there, because why push them away for so long? But when I was able to do self-compassion and say, you know what, shame, you can be here, and then just breathe through it, that's also allowed some of that to leave.
Beautiful. Amazing. So, so good. It's been so amazing catching up with you. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, just thank you. I just thank you for all you do. Thank you for being so brave. It's not easy to be a pioneer in this field, and you are, and I'm so grateful. And all of your podcasts have felt like truth and just brought me to a new place. So just thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. It's just been such an honor to, be with you through this process and see how far you've come from when we started together a few months ago to where you are now. And yeah, I just remember our last conversation a couple of weeks ago when you were like, I'm just feeling neutral. And like I was like, yes.
I know.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, it might not last, it might kind of go up and down, but it means it's there.
Oh yeah, just the fact that it could appear like that, I was like, wait a second. So yeah.
Yeah, so so good. But I just appreciate you. I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate the way that you've supported everyone else in the community and being there for them as well. Yeah, you're just someone that really brings a lot of compassion to other people too, as which aligns to your values. So it all makes sense. Thank you so much, Anne.
Oh, thank you.
Rock on.